At the start of the war, many German officers did not fear the American soldier. They underestimated him, not because they had beaten him in battle, not because they had studied him closely, but because propaganda had taught them a story. America, they were told, was soft, rich, comfortable. A country of radios, refrigerators, movie theaters, and full dinner tables. Europe had professional armies. America had citizens. And in the early years of World War II, that seemed like an easy judgment to make. The Wehrmacht had marched through Poland, crushed France, driven deep into the Soviet Union. Its officers had fought against armies with long traditions, hardened ranks, and brutal battlefield experience. So when American troops began appearing in North Africa, then Sicily, Italy, France, Belgium, and finally Germany itself, some German commanders expected courage, maybe, but not mastery, not speed, not that endless, grinding pressure that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then the shooting started, and one assumption after another began to die. The first lesson was that American units did not behave the way German officers expected them to behave. German command culture valued order, preparation, and control. Plans moved through channels. Orders came from above. The system prized discipline, hierarchy, and precision. American units had discipline too, but they also had something that was harder to measure on a map. They trusted lieutenants. They trusted sergeants. They trusted men close enough to the fight to see what was actually happening. To a German officer watching from the other side of the line, that could look messy. An American patrol might pull back, then return from an angle no one predicted. A platoon might lose its officer and keep moving because a sergeant simply took over. A roadblock might be bypassed, not after a staff conference, but because someone at the front found a farm track, a broken hedge, or a gap in the dark. At first, some German commanders mistook that for disorder. Then they began to understand the danger. Disorder breaks apart. This did not. American troops could absorb confusion, make a decision, and keep the fight moving. And the longer the campaign went on, the faster they learned. North Africa taught them how not to fight the Germans. Italy taught them the price of mountains, mud, and stone villages. Normandy taught them hedgerows, mines, and fields, where every opening could be a kill zone. The Ardennes taught them cold, isolation, and shock. Each campaign cost them, but each campaign hardened them. The army Germany first judged as inexperienced was becoming harder to predict every month. The second lesson came from something German soldiers could feel before they could explain it. American firepower did not arrive as a single blow. It arrived as a chain. A squad made contact. Then mortars answered. Then artillery began to walk across the ground. Then tanks pushed up behind the smoke. Then, when the sky was clear, aircraft came down over the road nets, bridges, and assembly areas. To German troops, a small fight against Americans had a way of becoming a large fight very quickly. That was not luck. It was the battlefield face of an industrial nation. Behind the American infantrymen stood trucks, radios, fuel, repair depots, replacement parts, ammunition columns, engineers, factories, shipyards, and railheads stretching all the way back across the Atlantic. German commanders had expected soldiers. What they met was a system. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel understood the danger earlier than many. He warned that Germany could not treat American power as a joke. Its army might still be learning, but its industrial strength was enormous. And once that strength found a way onto the battlefield, it changed the rhythm of combat. A German unit could win a local exchange and still find itself buried under the next wave. One American tank knocked out did not mean the pressure stopped. One truck destroyed did not starve the column. One battery silenced did not make the artillery disappear. There always seemed to be more. More shells, more vehicles, more fuel, more men moving forward behind the men already fighting. That was the part many German officers came to hate. They could defeat a piece of the American force, but they could not easily exhaust the machine behind it. The third lesson was the one German veterans remembered with a special kind of dread. American artillery. Every army used artillery. But the American system made it unusually fast, unusually responsive, and unusually punishing. Forward observers moved with the infantry. Radios linked the front line to firing batteries. Fire direction centers turned reports into coordinates. Guns that were miles apart could be made to strike the same target with frightening coordination. And then there was time on target. The idea was simple enough to explain. Different artillery batteries fired from different distances. Their shells traveled for different lengths of time. So American crews calculated the shots so that the rounds arrived together. Not one battery first, not a slow build, not a warning that allowed men to dive deeper, scatter farther, or brace for the next wave. Just silence. Then everything landing at once. For soldiers on the receiving end, it could feel as if the ground had opened without warning. A command post vanished. A road junction became smoke and splinters. A tree line that had looked safe a second earlier became a storm of metal. German General Friedrich von Mellenthin later wrote about the overwhelming nature of American firepower, and he was not alone. German veterans of the Western Front repeatedly named American artillery as one of the most feared dangers they faced. It was not only the size of the barrage, it was the speed, the accuracy, the way a hidden observer could turn a patch of earth into a killing ground before the men inside it fully understood they had been found. That changed behavior. It slowed movement. It made crossroads dangerous. It made daylight dangerous. It made concentration dangerous. And for an army already running short of fuel, transport, and replacements, being forced to disperse under American artillery made every other problem worse. The fourth lesson came when German commanders discovered that Americans did not always break when surrounded. The clearest symbol came in December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge. The German offensive cut into the Ardennes in a final attempt to split the Allied armies and recover the initiative in the west. Snow covered the roads. Fog grounded aircraft. Units were scattered. Confusion spread across the front. And one town mattered more than almost any other: Bastogne. The roads around Bastogne were vital. If German forces could take the town, they could open movement through the Ardennes and keep the offensive alive. American defenders held it. Then German forces surrounded it. Supplies fell. Medical conditions worsened. The cold bit into every foxhole and aid station. The men inside knew they were cut off. The Germans knew it too. So they sent a demand for surrender. On paper, the situation looked simple. A surrounded force, low on supplies, in brutal weather, facing a major German offensive. The answer should have been negotiation or collapse. Instead, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe sent back one word: nuts. The reply became famous because it sounded almost absurd. But what mattered to German officers was not the humor. It was the refusal behind it. The defenders did not surrender. They kept holding. They endured the shelling, the cold, the shortage of supplies, and the uncertainty of whether help would arrive in time. And when relief finally came, Bastogne had become more than a tactical problem. It had become evidence. Evidence that American troops could be surrounded and still remain dangerous. Evidence that the army Germany had once dismissed could produce men who held their ground when every practical reason seemed to point the other way. The fifth lesson was the one that cut deepest into the propaganda. The American soldier was not soft. He was not the comfortable tourist in uniform that Nazi caricatures had promised. He was a factory worker from Ohio, a farm boy from Iowa, a clerk from New York, a mechanic from Texas, a student from California, a son, a brother, a husband, a neighbor. And when the war put a rifle in his hands, he learned, often painfully, often after mistakes. But he learned. He crossed the desert in North Africa. He climbed the wet, cold ridges of Italy. He crawled through the hedgerows of Normandy, where a field could be a trap and a road could be a funnel for machine gun fire. He slept in mud. He advanced through towns smashed into stone dust. He fought in the forests of the Ardennes with frozen feet, empty stomachs, and artillery breaking the trees above him. German officers had believed comfort would make Americans brittle, but comfort had not erased endurance. It had hidden it. The United States did not produce soldiers in the old European mold. It produced civilians who could be trained, armed, transported across oceans, and connected to a national system powerful enough to keep them in the fight. That was the final shock. America's strength was not one weapon, not just the Sherman tank, not just the P-51 Mustang, not just the artillery that German veterans feared. Its strength was combination: industry plus mobility, radios plus artillery, trucks plus fuel, officers plus sergeants, factories plus citizens. A destroyed vehicle could be replaced. A broken bridge could be repaired. A lost supply dump could be rebuilt. A setback could be absorbed. Because the American soldier did not stand alone. Behind him stood a country that had turned itself into an arsenal. By 1945, German officers were no longer laughing at the American GI. They had seen him adapt under fire. They had seen his artillery tear apart positions before an attack. They had seen his supply lines keep moving when German fuel tanks ran dry. They had seen surrounded units keep fighting. They had seen men they once called soft push across half of Europe and into Germany itself. The arrogance had burned away. So had the stereotype. What remained was respect, forced into existence by battle. The Wehrmacht had started the war believing that discipline, tradition, and experience would decide everything. But the Americans brought something different. A citizen army that could learn, an industrial system that could replace almost anything, and ordinary soldiers who kept moving after the enemy had already decided they should have stopped. That was the lesson many German officers learned too late. Never judge an enemy by the story your own side tells about him, because the soldier you dismiss in the beginning may become the army standing in your capital at the end.